The fifth dimension truly is a new earth, heaven on earth. Your realization of all that you are, where you can then create your reality through effortless ease as you intended it to be. But you do not do so through separation or lack and limitation. You understand that consciousness is what summons energy into form. You go beyond the law of attraction. You go beyond manifestation into true creation. What you want and what you need shows up even before you know you need it. Robert Bauer is a seasoned technology IS professional and over 40 years of marketing and business strategy development for a variety of software solutions covering manufacturing, supply chains, finance, and data systems, including encryption, AI machine learning, blockchain architecture, and cryptocurrencies. He is also an author, audio engineer, musician, and voice artist for the Nexus Next cast. Bauer Media and his indie sound and music label Intuitive Sound. He says he enjoys wandering as a psychonaut, gathering nuggets of knowledge, searching for the nexus where everything connects. Tonight, Robert will provide us with the interpretation of reality from a hermetic, first principle perspective of mentalists being the source of the force that guides our course. I see consciousness as the source of all that is, says Robert Bauer. Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to Andromeda 7, your celestial gateway. And it's your channel for community support, help, friendship, love, knowledge, and being of value to others. Welcome back. If you're new to the channel, it's so good to have you with us. And you know what tonight is. It's Friday night. It's time to feed your mind and grow your heart. And tonight we have the Metrix of the Matrix with our very special guest, Robert Bauer. And I'm super stoked and very excited to be with you guys tonight. This is going to be a great discussion. Lots to talk about. And just a couple people in chat. I see you, Lee. Very good to see you. Thanks for being here. And I know people will start rolling in. Scotty Boy, good to see you as well. Good. That's kind of it for the moment. So looks like people are going to come in when they come in, or they'll rewatch the show at a later time. But I'll pass it over to you, Teresa.
Thank you. Well, happy Friday, everyone. Good to see you.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming back, Robert. We're really looking forward to this discussion tonight.
The invitation is an honor, and thank you.
It's good to have you with us. And welcome back, Dalibor and Karen. And Brian, I guess, is coming back in. There he is.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm excited about it because this first hermetic principle says it all for me. All is mind. And there's the whole meaning. The universe itself has an underlying and foundational level is mental. And everything we think about and plan for and execute in our existence here is all through our thoughts, actions, and reactions and emotions. And so I'm really interested in your philosophy of how you're defining consciousness as the all that is, because I resonate with that too. So does Lori. We all pretty much feel that. And I've always viewed it as different planes and levels of existence. You know, people talk about quantum reality or quantum physics, and everything's a tune, everything's a vibration, and all these different planes, whether they're physical, mental, spiritual, they're all interconnected through various different tones or various variations of the same energy. It's all the same energy. And I think that's what people tend to forget, is that it's just various degrees of how we experience those energies and how we react to them and respond to them. So I want to hear your perspective on it. And you've developed this whole philosophy of informatica. And what is informatica? How did you get into it? And some people have followed you on other programs before and heard bits and pieces of this over the years, but you've been evolving it. So where are we now with it?
Well, first of all, thank you everyone for inviting me, having me here, and letting me flap my yap from the nuggets in my noggin. Informatica originally was a download in the middle of the night about 4 years ago. And it was one of those situations where sleep was not going to happen because the mind was just getting a dump. And I was like, whoa, look at that. Whoa, what's that mean? Whoa, wait a minute. I better write this down. So I started writing down what was coming through. Lasted for maybe an hour and a half. And I was like, I don't know what that was, but I'm going to have to go back and have another visit and have a think.
Yeah, sound like a download.
Yeah, in the expression of people experiencing that, that's what it was like to me. It was like, here it comes. So shortly after that, I had been doing some shows with Rocky Stucci, and we would just come on and talk about whatever knowledge domain was the du jour. We talk about archaeology and different sociological and cultural stuff, and then we talk about tech. Because I stumbled into technology. It tripped me up, and it kept me there for the last 40 years. And it wasn't something I went to pursue. I did not get a degree in it. I have a lot of certifications in the different fields of technology, but I don't have a computer science degree or anything. So that reference is to the fact that what informatica seemed to me as I continued to look at it was an information set. And that everything is information in one way, shape, or form. And it doesn't matter if it's tangible, if it's intangible, if it's corporeal or non-corporeal. It's still information that we experience, that we think about, that we have this mental experience with, and that's how we process reality.
Vibrational.
And well, the more I got into it, I started realizing I was tying it back to my tech, and we can get into the slides, and I can talk more about this. But in essence, everything is information. Information is what we use and what we experience with our senses that we have in their limited ranges, and it's what we use to interact with and engage in the reality that we experience. And that's just fundamental. It doesn't matter what your belief system, your background, or anything else. That's how the mind of consciousness works. And it's just very fundamental. And we're going to get into some more specifics about that. But as I got informatica and I started, I was doing some data encryption work, I started looking at the correlations and all of the different dots, the nexuses of those two, because informatica felt like a consciousness thing, and my technology is more of a physical or corporeal thing, right? So I started seeing the dots and I went, what's going on here? So I kept being compelled. Curiosity is probably my biggest strength as well as weakness. And I have an overly fertilized field of imagination. So
I can relate.
When my curiosity gets going, it goes running around in the field of imagination and stirs up all kinds of stuff. So that I think curiosity is one of the ways in which inspiration is expressed. And there's a whole really important component of the way that the mind functions, and that is language. And one of my theories is that language is the operating system of the mind. And when you think about language and the uses, the symbologies, and we'll get into this in more detail, but when you realize that there is this way in which you describe your experiences that's based on language, which has a bunch of frequencies and symbols and so forth, and all of that, as I was looking at informatica, well, we got to capture this. It has to be the delineation and distinction of our experiences, and the information is what is informatica.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get into the slides, we can start unraveling this nut that I just laid on the table.
You got it. Let me get that out of the way real quick. There we go.
So again, first of all, thank you guys for indulging an old man with his nonsense and from his noggin.
It's our pleasure.
This is a work in progress. It is all speculative, as everything is. So it's just my interpretation of the experience and the information that I've encountered, especially when I've tried to make sense of the reality that I inhabit. And that really has been my journey. It started more of from a spiritual perspective, but then it became a physical perspective. And it's like, okay, I need to find something that explains or at least gives me some definition to my experience. And there's all kinds of interpretation stories, mythos, all etc., philosophies of how that is. And every time I looked at one, it was like, you're close, but no cigars.
Not quite right. Yep.
So I started going, okay, I've got to assemble those things in a way that I can frame them, and then I can explain them, and then try to make sense out of them. So that's why it's called Informatica, the metrics in the matrix. It's the measurement of the experiences and what they mean and how they're defined. So, let me get over here and get on the right screen.
Okay.
So what we're going to talk about tonight is the framework of this concept. And we're going to go through the way that people have thought and expressed thoughts on reality. We'll go through the definitions, the matrix of the conscious mind, frequency physics, which goes to what you were talking about earlier, Teresa, that I think is the way I'm interpreting it. And then what is Informatica, the picture of it, because it's got a lot of moving parts. It's got a lot of complexity. It's got a lot of simplicity. And therein lies the exploration. So just for some context, why this is where it is because of my journey. I'm a musician. Started playing music at 13. I got into technology again. As I said, I stumbled into it. It wasn't something that I chose, but I've been doing it for a long time, doing a lot of stuff with it. I'm a student of philosophy. Going back to the statement that I was looking for something that gave definition to my experience, and I went through the religions. I had a Christian ministry in a Pentecostal church, laid hands on the sick, cast out devils, spoke in tongues, did all of that esoteric stuff. And it's real. It's not the definition that they've given for it, I think, is lacking, but it's real stuff.
Yeah.
What did that mean, right? So then I started traveling, through my my philosophical journey in science and trying to figure out what's going on. So I made everything from stump grinders to medical cameras, eventually got into software, made software for Fortune 500 companies, traveled all over the world installing that stuff. And it was just like this magic experience that I had no idea. It was not in the bucket list. It wasn't even near the bucket. But there it was. And for the last 20 years, I've been a content creator. So I do voiceover work, audio, video production. I'm a musician, do podcasts as a host and a guest, as in here. So that's the background of where all of this, or the context where this is genned from. I have work. You can see the different things that I've done, robertbauer.com, where all of my stuff is basically kind of organized and aggregated with little snippets. I have my music label, which is Intuitive Sound. So that's a place where a lot of the work that I've done in music is produced. I have a merch site called Mindwear Apparel, where you can get things that with thought-provoking make your mind work and wear it at the same time. And then lastly, the last thing that I created just about almost a year ago was Metrix. And Metrix is my exploration into meditation and into contemplation. So I've got a series of works that I created that's based on three simple components to achieve full meditation. That's breath, body, and mind. So I created those, and then I went and said, there's a lot of great quotes, a lot of great thinkers. So I created a contemplations component of it where you can go and listen to me read the works of the ancients. Okay. So that's me, that's my stuff, and there you go. If you look
And
at
you're
any of that
sticking
stuff,
to it.
if you look at any of that stuff, then you'll go, I see where this nutbag came from. So getting into thinkers of reality, I think it's really important to understand the way in which thought and consciousness has been expressed over time by all kinds of different individuals, philosophies, theologies, and so forth. And one of my favorite, and because this came right out of the Informatica download, was asking questions. Because first of all, I don't think enough questions are asked, but more importantly, they're not the right questions. And a lot of the stuff that we've experienced in the geopolitical space, and particularly in the United States, but all over the world for the last 3 years, has given me the answers I've been given about that event and the things that happened within it don't make any sense. So I'm going, well, I need to revisit your answers, and let's start with the question that you asked. I'd like to know what question did you ask to get that answer? Because that answer makes no sense. So it gave me more of a sense of, I really need to know how things are framed. So Richard Feynman's quote, I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. It's like, we should all be living in that state, I think, just as a base framework of how we engage with reality. And also keeping in mind that another one of his is that he has approximate answers, possible beliefs, different degrees of uncertainty about different things, but he's not absolutely sure of anything. And what that to me means, it's something about, as I was going through the Informatica, and it was just evolving and cooking along. One of the things that came up was, hey, everything is speculation. There is no certainty of anything. The only thing that we each individually can count on is our own interpretation and the speculation of our reality, of what our experiences are. Those things are made by, they're constructed by language and different things, by different cultures and philosophies and belief systems and theologies and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's your experience. No one is going to have that experience but you.
True.
So not knowing anything and pursuing filling those gaps and those holes is one of the most profound and powerful things for me. I didn't realize I was doing, but I was doing it since I can remember, because that's why I went through all those different experiences. Socrates, life is possible only through conscious awareness. Pretty simple.
Yeah.
I think profound and makes sense. And by the way, please jump in at any point you
Absolutely
have anything to add to this.
Okay.
Plato. The world very much in truth, a living creature and came into being alive. So that everything is consciousness. Everything is alive. Everything that's organic has consciousness.
Absolutely agree with that.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you think of the reality in that way, then you look at things completely differently. If you think that you are the only thing and your fellow humanoids and meat suits are the only things conscious, then you miss out on all of the other information that's actually available in your reality, because the consciousness of things will show up to you in your awareness. Talking of the soul to itself. Now, I'm not sure soul's the right word. I have questions about these definitions of soul and spirit.
Yeah.
I would call it the I am presence.
The I am. Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
But thought is one's interaction with one's own consciousness. at a minimum,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Because the first thing you say to yourself, at least for me, was, I am. And what does that mean? It means I exist. I am.
I am. I exist.
Yeah.
Therefore, I am.
I'm alive.
At some point it became, and there's others too.
Mm-hmm. True.
I always fell in line with I think, therefore I am. I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because just for me, just because I'm thinking, it apparently expresses or gives me an experience of being.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a new shirt I'm putting on mine where it's being a being.
Being.
So I think that that's really what we are and what we do. And then everything else is added on and massage manipulated and everything else. And
a spiritual being having a human experience.
Right. That's I remember back in the 90s when the new age movement was really kicking in, and boy was I was deep in my corporate world, but I was going new age. I'll go home and do that at night, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to let my fellow nerds know that I'm, geeking out on the esoterica at home. To me, being a being is at a minimum what we are, and how that is defined and expressed and engaged with, interacted with, integrated with is all up to the individual, and it's all speculative. Everything's a guess. Everything is a guess. And sometimes the guesses are right, sometimes they're not. And you're hoping you're on the right side more than not. Taoism, which is where I am now. I ended up there after learning Tai Chi. In the mid 80s, I became a shiatsu practitioner. So which is, for those who don't know what that is, it's Japanese acupressure. We don't use needles. We use the same meridians, but we use pressure points. And I had to learn traditional Chinese medicine and herbology. And that exposed me to the Eastern understanding and teachings of medicine. And then in the 90s, I joined a Tai Chi group and eventually became an instructor. And that's what launched me deeper into the study of Taoism. Taoism fulfilled that question that I had within myself I mentioned earlier. Show me something that defines or explains my experience that I can resonate with. And Taoism was the closest thing through all the different belief systems and that I had explored and experienced. So Taoism, the key thing about the Tao is that which can describe the Tao is not the Tao. In other words, it's not only incorporeal, but it's unintelligible. And if you think about the way that God tried in the Western belief systems is typically described, the Essenes and a lot of the scholars and scribes that didn't make it into the current version of the official book. There was a whole bunch of Enoch and many others that had all kinds of teachings that were way outside of what was left in the book.
I think those types of teachers represent the time that they were in and when they lived, because they're no longer those beings anymore. They're in spirit now, but they represent the time frame that they lived in. And I think that's an interesting observation.
Yeah, and what's interesting is when you add, the whole idea, the concept of Hermeticism and the Kabbalion, and mystery schools, the mystic arts, there's been a consistent set of information that's been protected and maintained and passed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that is where the real nuggets of reality are. And
absolutely.
And I think a lot of it, because of the power of it, because of not only the liberation from the containers that we've been given to go experience life in, it's not only liberation, but it's the power of that. Once you realize the power of the mind and the consciousness and the way that universe and consciousness manifests universe, because consciousness is energy. We'll get into more of this here, but the expression of the materium that we experience is the result of the energy from consciousness that manifests it. And once that is understood, and then you start fine-tuning your experience to resonate in that knowledge and in those frequencies, that's when the real power of our cognitive experience can not only become a reality, but flourish. So Taoism, the innate nature is connected with one's heart mind. Sense of oneness with self. And that oneness with self is actually the consciousness that is. I was saying in the 90s, I got really tired of people going, oh, you have to go connect with the one. You have to go seek the one. And I'm going, no, the one is
already here.
It's everything. Yeah.
So you're pointing them in the wrong direction. Shame on you. And by doing that, you just send people chasing squirrels and nuggets and stuff going down holes everywhere.
Well, I like the way this is framed, heart, mind. They're not separating heart from mind.
No.
And that's what I was saying earlier. There's different levels of emotion and response to certain situations. But it's all how you think about it. So heart and mind, when they say you're coming from a heart space, it's that you're thinking, your thoughts are coming from a space of love and caring and compassion and that emotion. So you don't have to separate. You can't really separate your mind from your heart. But people make that delineation for some reason. I like the way this is put. They combine the two, heart mind. I mean, if you're not coming from a heart space, then where are your thoughts coming from? And is that where you're led into other areas?
Well, and I think the important thing is, even before that, is to understand what do those two words individually and collectively mean. And this is where, when we get into the mental processes, how they function, how important language is, and the definitions. And that's one of my personal pet peeves with the whole New Age and fifth dimension and all these other different delineations of what's going on. It's like there's too much added to the simple experience of existence. And it gets flowery, and then it becomes it's used lazily, and it becomes too predictable and cliche, and that's because it doesn't have the real source of the essence of its meaning. But I'm getting down another squirrel herd, and we keep going. We'll get to that when we get to the matrix of the conscious mind.
Okay.
So I think, again, Buddha's was, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. So the thoughts are what we think. Thoughts are like little energy nuggets that just pop out. And I'll throw this out as a teaser. Consciousness has characteristics, nature, and habits. One of its main habits and nature is, as it creates energy, energy is its essence. It's how it expresses itself. That energy is in a constant creation cycle. So the nature of consciousness is constant creation.
Constant expansion.
Which is, if you're expanding, you're adding, so you're creating, and etc., right?
It never ends.
But its nature is to create and unfold.
Yes.
And express. And one of its key things is novelty, newness. So when we get to that, I'm really looking forward to some input on this, because this was me going, you're getting out there, Bauer, you're hanging 10. Um,
I like it.
Interesting. Since
So-
you've spoken of novelty, I guess, have you read Thinking in Destiny by Percival then?
Oh.
That reminds me, because that's what the whole you're talking just reminds me of his works. So I'm thinking, you must have
so
read Percival.
it's like this thick in like
And
6.6
that's right.
font.
Yeah, it's one of
Wow.
my favorite. Well, it's because it's one of the ones I've read, so it just, yeah.
Yeah, I
It's just
love that
because
work.
you mentioned novelty, yeah.
Yeah, I love his work, and yes, I have it, and that's why I have to get out my magnifying glass. I have my magnifying glass.
Yeah.
Get in there and go
Yeah,
look
I
at
know.
stuff
Very small print.
and
Excellent.
see.
Okay. I
So
thought so. Okay.
I knew there was going to be, synchronicity and at least some correlation here with this group. So please do jump in, help me out here, help a brother stumble through this, will you?
I love the Buddha. The Buddha, yeah. You are what you think you are.
Well,
Right.
I
You
think
become
I'd
what you
like to
think you
expand
become.
upon actually the term and the concept of novelty, because that's really important if you get into the depth of that, which will let you, Robert, because it's your works, but and what that means, because the whole concept of our whole reality is the basis of creating novelty. Period. Of what we're doing here. So I'll let you handle that.
Thank you, and that's perfect because when I get into where I place that and its process, then I think it'll make sense. But if it doesn't, you better let me know.
Okay.
So Hinduism, right? This is where the Atman. There is what you're.
Mm-hmm.
It's the expression of the Brahman, the supreme soul, right? Well, you can just replace, in my opinion, that all of that with consciousness. And here's where they, at least from the Hinduism and Taoism, has a different approach to the cycles. I don't refer to it as reincarnation. I refer to it as iteration.
Uh-huh.
I like that.
To me, we go through an iterative process of
Mhm.
experience, not just in this biological form, but in other forms.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but the idea of reincarnation is, the repetitive cycle to learn and then graduate, is in Hinduism. And the other key component is that it's a continuous cycle. So I said earlier that consciousness, its nature is energy. It expresses itself in energy, which are frequencies.
Hmm.
So the frequency set that energy expresses, or that does, its habit is not only to constantly grow, and if you have any experience with plasma physics, plasma is balls of energy. So in a sense, think of consciousness from that perspective and that metrics. But then what happens is all these frequencies fall out, and these frequencies just create the universe.
Hmm.
So everything is always in creation. It's always it's always moving. It's always in motion.
Well, a simpler word for plasma is simply fire. Fire is a form of plasma as well.
And then we have plasma in our blood, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So this continuous cycle is the other characteristic that I was trying to get to
Hmm.
on the overall view of consciousness. So its nature is energy. The nature of energy are frequencies. Those frequencies continue to evolve and create and make novelty in cycles. It is a cyclical sense of the frequencies, their nature. So we'll get more into that.
Okay.
Alfred Whitehead was a philosopher, and an English philosopher, and a mathematician. When quantum mechanics and quantum theory started coming out in the 1920s, the other philosophers are struggling with it, but because Whitehead was a mathematician, he went, I know what this is going to do. So the interesting concept here, and this goes back to the Hermetic principles, which we're going to get to, is polarity. And he looked at the whole idea of quantum theory was that everything waves. There aren't billiard balls knocking around and creating these atomic structures. All of those are individual waves. And why is it a wave? Because it's a frequency of energy. So what he said was, here's the thing is that time and space are required for a wave to wave in.
But so is a
Okay.
medium. So is a medium.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
So that's the nature and reality of the materium that we experience, meaning all of our physical reality. But it also throws into, you know, the whole discussion about, you know, everybody's got different ideas about what is time. Is it real? Is it an illusion? Is it whatever? No, time is a characteristic of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
If you have energy that creates frequencies, that create waves, that creates the materium, then everything is always moving. And when we get into the Metrix, we'll go through some examples of what that looks like and what we know today. But the past pole being the body and the future pole being the mind was Whitehead's perspective. And I think that opens up a whole new range of rethinking of the mind-body connection.
Kind of like the Earth and having the two poles, the South Pole and the North Pole, the way it spins in the atmosphere.
Like Max just said, it just appears as a wave because it's spinning. And that's how I see it. Everything's spinning all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a question too, Robert, just about, because you mentioned about time, and I kind of look at it because we're talking about information. And to me, sort of time is actually the transfer rate within the construct that we're within. So, and time can vary actually, and it's not constant. And we've actually had different periods within our history where we've actually had different times, including different calendars that were 360 days or 365. So time is very variable and something that we can kind of manipulate or use or whatever. So, and we always say time speeding up and things are happening. So yeah, so I came to the conclusion, sort of, there's other work out there that it's actually considered just the transfer rate of information within our reality.
Well said, and I completely agree. In fact, it made me think of the technology work that I'm doing is on blockchain and artificial intelligence. Well, I've designed a system that is based on math and science as opposed to business and the way business is done. Short story to it is that the key component of that system is called the system state manager. And what you just described as far as time is it's anytime, pun intended, time happens, there's a change in the system, in the state of the information. Okay. So I agree with what you're saying, Karen, that, time is a variable, but it is a component. You can't, a wave isn't going to wave unless it has time to do it.
Yeah, I'd say more it's an attribute than a component. It would be an attribute of a principle.
Well, it's almost like a medium in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, time is just something, however it's delineated and expressed, and with its fluidity and its attenuation and extremes, it's always there, just like that frequency is always there, just like the energy is always there.
Yeah, linear timelines.
We could go down the rabbit hole of time travel and all those other things, but
right.
but instead of doing that, we'll go into some mental time travel and throw that on the table. We're almost through these. Leibniz was one of the guys that he took Newton's calculus and made it the calculus that we use today, which is what we use in all the advanced sciences and physics and so forth. He had an interesting perspective in that he thinks that everything is a monad, and the monad is an individual piece of consciousness looking at and mirroring the reality it sees.
Uh-huh.
And I went, okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that would make us in a simulation type environment or a fractal holographic reality then.
It's just so the
In terms
monad.
of modern language, perhaps, but
Yeah,
go ahead, Robert.
the idea of an individual unit of existence observing its reality and it's mirroring that reality to itself,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Is an interesting concept of the way in which consciousness seems to manifest at an individual level from, let's call it little c versus big C, right?
It's each atom. In this case, what he's saying is each atom has a life and of its own, and it's a fractal of any other. So we're all fractals of one another and all reflections of one another. Is that what that's saying?
Not necessarily. It just says that going down to the smallest unit that we can possibly discern, like let's say the electron, everything has its own consciousness that is unique to its own self, and therefore has its own spirit, soul, and it is also therefore immortal. I mean, you can't kill an electron. You can't. You can only make it change places.
And that's great point. That goes back to my point about the nature of consciousness is energy. Energy, in the second part is when we start getting in, not tonight, because tonight's just the framework. But when we get into the metrics, if you guys want to come back and keep going on this, that's where we're going to dive into all of the strange metrics and the problems with it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rupert Sheldrake. He's the author, morphogenesis or the morphic resonance, right? Well, his book Science Set Free in the US, and it's called Science Delusion in the UK, came out, I think it was about 10 years ago. And he just eviscerates the dogmas. He takes the 10 dogmas, and they are way worth exploring, which are going to be a part of part 2 of this. But that goes back to the point about it's all subjective, right? Whatever reality and whoever's definition of that reality you adopt is up to you. And that's the monad making its choice.
That's right. That's the part of our free will.
And then there's the whole thing about free will. Is people like, do we have free will? Well, if the universe didn't have a habit of creating, then free will wouldn't be there. Creation is the act of free will. Novelty is the act of free will. Let's see. And I think we got just a couple more here. Aldous Huxley. All right. Space, time, and mind emerge from the one mind. Consciousness is fundamental. Will, that's the intent, right, is the mind manipulating reality. Divination is the mind that can know everything. Clairvoyance, clairaudience, non-local consciousness, scrying.
Intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And theurgy means the physical embodiment, right, is not just from mind. All right, so this is where all the paranormal and the multidimensional and our cosmic cousins and all those others probably fall through this particular path of knowledge. But that's for another time. There's a new idea of conscious. Basically, panpsychism is from the original idealist thinking and philosophy back in the 1800s. And idealist didn't mean wanting to do good and be altruistic to everything. Idealist meant that it's all down to just the mind. Idealism was it's just about the mind. So same thing as the first Hermetic principle. But this particular concept adds another twist, another flavor to it, that consciousness has an integrative capacity and it requires complexity to integrate for it to do its thing. So I found that perspective is like, because everything that I think about is really complex, whether I think it is or not. It just seems like it is, right? And
Well,
it's
yeah, to a creature like a mollusk, any thought that any of us humans have is going to be radically complex. It's going to be orders of magnitude more complex than anything that mollusk can ever conceive.
so the idea of complexity, integrated complexity and consciousness. I went, I like I know what those words, how I interpret them.
So what? If you're simple-minded, you can't think?
So,
No.
I think thinking and thought is you're just doomed with it. I mean, you're going to have it, and how well it works is up to you, and a whole bunch of other things. But anyway, so I found this to be quite interesting. It was another perspective on thinking about reality. So that was there's a whole bunch more. I had to cut this way back so I could try to get it in to the show tonight. But those perspectives, I think, are incredibly valuable in adding attributes and patterns and relationships to the information that we have, that we use to define our experience of consciousness and reality. There's a lot of different flavors, a lot of different monads. You could think of each one of those as an individual monad and its interpretation of reality. So welcome, monads. We're all here tonight. So everybody with me so far?
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
definitely.
Definitely.
thought creates consciousness creates thought, and it creates. I think consciousness created its own body, its own form of expression, the physicality aspect of it, because your soul is from vibrational energy, which is light, and this is everything that you're not in the etheric realms when you're here. So it's just you're attending school like Yale or Harvard or something like that. You're in the higher school when you're here, and to have a body and to mix that with a consciousness, that kind of brings everything together. And so then you become the creator of who you are and what you do in the world.
Yes.
Trippy.
The manifestation of the mind. And the mind is, for me, is we're going to get into that here. So see, it's easy to get squirreled here. You guys try to keep me on track. So let's get into the definitions based on those individual interpretations and expressions of this thing called consciousness, this thing called the mind. It's a wide range, but they all seem, for the most part, kind of be saying similar or the same thing, or at least they're on the same frequency. They're on the same wavelength with one another. They're just expressing their views and observations on a different part of the wave.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Things that make you go,
And that's the whole idea of for me, the exploration is I do a lot of humming. Like, look at that. I don't know what that means.
Yep.
So, shall we continue?
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So we're
Oh, hold on.
going to go through a definition of informatica,
Okay.
and then the importance of the metrics of measurement, and then the matrix of consciousness. So informatica is the information in the conscious experience that makes up the components of reality. It's both a verb and a noun. The verb is the manifestation process of information, and the noun is the information that has manifested.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Wow.
All right.
Yep. Interesting take.
Now,
Mhm.
the importance, so it's informatica, the metrics and the matrix. So it's the numbers and the delineations, differentiations, and distinctions of the information in the matrix. So it's important to understand why, what is this measurement thing? And whether we think about it or not, we're constantly measuring. We're constantly, unconsciously and consciously. Oh, I got to reach for that glass. Oh, I got it. That's just okay. I knew just how far I had to go because it was a distance. It was a measurement that had to occur. Well, everything that we do has a measurement to it. And most importantly, the philosophies, the theologies, and the sciences that give us a framework of reality has measurements. We have cycles, we have rituals, we have times, we have all these different things that are measurements. So it's important to have it, to at least understand that measurements occur, because you can go measure whatever the hell you want, however the hell you want. But if you don't know it's there, you're not going to be able to measure it. In business, one of the key mantras is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Like measuring time.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Time is the one thing that we all have in common as far as a metric that we measure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So again,
we tend
go
to
ahead.
measure based on accomplishment, based on productivity, based on what's produced.
Progress.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yep.
progress can be positive or it can be negative, but it's still progress,
Yeah.
Yeah, one way or the other. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the key things here is that it doesn't matter if the experience is ethereal or material. And this is a really important part as it relates to consciousness. If it's material, we all have it. In fact, there's another place that we'll go to about this common band of reality, this frequency set that we all seem to inhabit, but then all kinds of stuff going in and out and around and above it and below it and everything else. The key is that they happen. It exists. It's a frequency set. That frequency set can be measured. And if you understand the constructs, excuse me, that give it distinction, delineation, differentiation, you can add it to your awareness stack and throw it into that overly fertilized field of imagination so that when your curiosity goes running amok, it's got a new piece of data to add to its experience. It's just very fundamental. There's no specific ideology or anything. This is just simple process experience. This is the empirical process of reality that we experience. So understanding the metrics that are important, you pick them, and then how they are measured and what their cycles are is where you got to start with everything. Because if you start somewhere else midstream or up on the top of the hill, you get dropped, but you have no idea how to get down or how would you even get up, but you got dropped there. You need as much information about consciousness and how it functions in order to manage that experience as possible.
Well, is measurement then not an evaluation?
Well, you could, yeah. I mean, you have to identify something and its characteristics before you can, and know what it is and the constructs of it before you can evaluate it. You need to know that at least it's there to evaluate, right?
Yeah,
So
I think.
not
Sorry,
one's
go ahead, Teresa.
does not one's perspective of what they value come into play in terms of how they measure and the
And
accuracy
value.
of measurement that they apply.
And what is value? Value is a measurement,
Right.
and
Value is
value
a
is
measurement.
subjective.
Right.
It's just like morals are subjective, ethics are subjective, fairness is subjective. You can't put definitions around any of those that are going to be everybody's going to be happy with.
No, and so you can't take a cookie cutter approach to the matrix either.
No, but knowing that they're there gives you a head start.
True.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Robert just now about consciousness and being aware of your consciousness or controlling it and having intent towards your consciousness and the benefit or value of that. For me, that would be. I'm just thinking like. To have that much awareness or intent would have some control in your creation process of manifestation within this reality, and why some people that spend a lot of time looking at that have better success of creating what they want in this reality, and why other people cannot create or seem to create what they want in this reality because they don't spend enough time of looking at what you're speaking of, a consciousness and the intent and the control of creating and the responsibility of your reality, and they leave it willy-nilly to everybody else because they spend no time in that arena. And so then that means you're leaving your life, your happiness, and everything usually to the collective and to other people because you're not spending the time necessary within your own consciousness to and the intent
Right.
and to understand
Great
that
point.
and control. That's what I'm sort of getting here.
Yes.
Yeah. From what you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy shit! Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what made sense. Like just that when that just one point there about
You're in the right
control.
environment for this, Robert.
Yes,
Yeah.
no doubt.
It-
Yeah,
like, for
we
me, like,
resonate
it just
with
blew
that.
away like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For me as a Toltec, that's part of it, that intent, right? It's the intent and the control of your thoughts, awareness, and that gives you that extra edge of creating your reality and manifestation
Self-mastery.
that you want, self-mastery of your world. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
In other
Yes.
words, if you can measure something, you can measure it in any units that you want to. You can measure it in decimal units. You can measure it in units of E or logarithms or some other, and that's also a system of reframing experiences.
You're spot on. And that's why one of the
Yep.
reasons that, as you see at the bottom of the slide there, it's called the framework. The framing of reality and consciousness has been utilized, manipulated, and abused
Mhm.
by man for the time that we know of. And apparently, according to some of the mythos, this seems to be something that goes on around the neighborhood and the galaxy and the universe. There's apparently this hierarchical, regular cycle of battles that go on, and they either happen out there and they come down here, and then we get it, and then we spin off into all these different civilizations and cultures and things that have the same storyline as what they say the people who came down and gave them stuff, what their story was.
Mhm.
I mean, the whole Anunnaki thing is, Anu and Enki and Elil and the strife, and it sounds like the Adam and Cain and Abel thing, and it's like, what's going on here? I mean, are you guys just repurposing the same concepts? I don't
Yeah.
know. That's a different rabbit hole. Sorry to.
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, you're
Yep.
correct. They're repetitive cycles and stories
Mhm.
that we repeat over and over and over. I'll give you an example of a stalled century and stalled everything. I mean, how many times do we have to take a simple book or movie, say like King Arthur or Robin Hood, and remake that story and remake that movie over and over and over and over again, right? It's a repetitive
Yep.
cycle, and it repeats within generations.
Same story, different telling.
Story, yeah, different
Mhm.
telling, different generation, but it's still a
Mhm.
repetitive cycle, just even a modern thing like that, through generations.
Yes, and it's something that's another metric,
A
right?
measurement,
Mhm.
yeah.
It's another
Or
metric.
it's
And how many times is that?
programming you pick up. It's just
Right?
that programming you pick up from, like, say, your parents or your friends. You pick up that
They
cycle.
hand you frames. They
Yeah.
give you their frames, and they say, "Here, go put
Yeah.
this
Does
around you."
this fit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This looks
Well,
good
Yeah.
on you.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I want to keep wearing that. It's not really my color.
Yeah.
Um, so more on the metrics is there's a body of knowledge called metrology, and metrology is where they contain all of the essentially they do everything, but it's mostly focused on what are known as the constants of light and gravity and all this stuff. And going back to Sheldrake's the science set free, he just destroys that, and it makes perfect sense. There are no constants. In fact,
That's right.
the whole idea of a law is so anthropocentric, and imposing that on the universe, on consciousness, and this invisible being that loves you, but he's going to send you to hell if you don't do the right thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, what is going on here?
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
there's a big disconnect
Definitely.
in the way that, and in fact, even after it was probably 2 or 3 years after I got out of my Pentecostal stint,
Yeah.
I
That
started
alone
telling
is
people,
mind racking.
oh man, it was something else. But
That was a number. I thought Catholicism was bad. When I
oh,
came out of the Pentecostal, I was like, ugh.
it was quite
Yeah.
something. But I
Oh,
started
yeah.
saying, hey, you know what? I get in these. I used to have Bible studies 3 nights a week focused on
Uh,
prophecy, and we dove deep, and it was crazy. But I started saying a few years after I got out of that, every time I ran into somebody, particularly from that belief model, I'd say, you know what? God didn't create man; man created God.
yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
And they
Oh
look at me
boy.
like, "Oh, a heretic! Get
Oh
behind
yeah.
me!"
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my
Get
God.
the cross out.
yeah.
Well, the
Yeah.
harshest judgment that you're going to ever experience would be from yourself. You judge yourself. There's nothing outside of you judging you. It's
Right.
all in you. How you saw your life, how you believed you lived your life. What did you accomplish? What didn't you accomplish? What were your goals? Did you reach those or did you not reach those? You're the one that's going to judge yourself. Nothing outside of you can judge you.
Well, the only thing I would say to that, Lori, is that depending on the framework that you've been given and adopted,
Mm-hmm.
your ego or sense of self may have been told certain things that that aren't really real about yourself, but you have been told that, it's like that. You'll never amount to anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're too
Right.
stupid. You're too short. You're too this, too that, whatever it might be. Not enough of this,
Uh,
not enough of that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
mhm.
Those things can seriously cloud and filter. The
Sure.
framework to me has a bunch of filters in it, and
Mm-hmm.
your filters, you have natural ones, and then you have the ones that come with the framework that somebody gives you. Those filters get clogged. Those filters need to be cleaned, sometimes replaced, sometimes calibrated, sometimes tossed,
That's a perfect
because
way
it
to
was a
put it.
bad filter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
So my point there is those are all ways in which metrics are at least encountered and
Influenced.
and looked at and experienced, so that you can determine what the hell it is you want to do with that metric. What is that new piece of data? And so my main point here is that last line: what and how you measure will define the difference in experience.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, because
Find the
there's
difference.
nothing
Or you
nothing
could
really
say
constant, because, like, for example, we know the speed of light's not constant. If you take, let's say, an aquarium full of water and put a glass of alcohol in it, and inside that glass you put a vacuum tube, you pass a light beam through that, well, guess what? The light beam is going to speed up and slow down and speed up and slow down about 6 times on its travel through those different mediums. So it is not constant.
Yeah.
Well, I'll
Plus,
tell you what I'm
you
thinking,
know
right?
what?
The way I'm. Go ahead,
Oh,
Karen.
well, for me, reading that last statement, it's interesting because for me, it's just that it's what and how you measure actually
Yes.
defines your whole experience, not just the
Yes.
difference in an experience. So for me, for your work, Robert, is the thing.
Mhm.
This to me, it's a little bit different for me. It's what and how you measure your whole consciousness of everything of your existence. It defines your whole experience, not just the difference.
Right.
Yeah,
You can choose to be led by the framework that other people provide to you, or you can choose to alter the framework, clear out the filters, reconstruct it,
Mhm.
and become your own evaluator. And I go back to what Lori was saying.
Mhm.
Nobody can evaluate you but yourself. It's just that you want to make sure your filters are true. What is your truth? So it's up to you to define the framework, not somebody else that's controlling that framework and defining it for you. There's overlays all your life as you're growing up, but then at some point you become the adult and then you do the research. You define the values, you define the rules that you play by and how you think about things. So you develop your framework. I'm not going to blame anybody for who I've turned out to be. I've had 63 years. My parents may have started me out a certain way, but I bloody well defined my own path. And it's very different from what their path was. So they didn't choose it for me. I chose my own path. And I think that that's what this is all. That Informatica gives you a framework for thinking about things in this way so that you can take that control of your own creation and do what you will with it.
Self-responsibility.
That's right. Right. That's what I'm saying, and how important this is, that it will dictate your whole experience from what Robert's showing.
Yeah, but it's also about the whole reframing thing. Like, a lot of people think about money. A lot of people think about wealth. Well, in certain societies, like tribal societies, your wealth is determined by how many goats you have. Well, by that metric, Elon Musk is a very poor man. But I'm sure if you asked him, he wouldn't agree.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's what I went down for.
So it all comes down to the metrics of Musk.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean,
Oh, God,
by
no.
Elon Musk's own metric, I'm sure he doesn't believe himself to be a poor man.
Well, Karen,
Deborah Sloan, yes, Dalibor, yes.
Karen, I completely agree with your point. That what I was trying to express here is the difference of the outcome. It will definitely determine and define it, but to me, it's the difference of that. What's the difference? And I'm trying to throw another metric in here. Is it going to be on the positive side of zero, or is it going to be on the bottom side of zero? That difference is going to be determined by what and how you measure. The outcome is
right.
It is inevitable because that experience will happen. But I'm trying to get people to think about
from your own perspective.
You have to do it from your own perspective, and you have to do it from understanding the base information in consciousness and reality, the metrics that how that's defined and how you experience those, and what's the process of it. You don't have to get into any theologies, philosophies, scientific models, metaphysics. It doesn't matter. Ethereum to the materium, doesn't matter. Everything, there are regular habits and nature of existence and experience. And that's, to me, the most important framework. From there, you can add on whatever the hell you want. Guss it up, throw some paint on it, throw some lights on it, do whatever you want to do to it. But the idea is to understand just how it functions and then how
Yeah.
you can use it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, just as an example, I mean, this is one of the metrics that we all are experiencing. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
important one, but just so that people understand that they're just in the sense of energy and frequency, there's a little tiny sliver of it that we experience with the senses that we have. On either side, to the lower end or to the higher end, is a whole bunch of stuff going on that we have no experience with. We don't know it's there. We didn't know it was there until we built the toys and the tools and the
Mm-hmm.
technology to get the
Mm-hmm.
telemetry. Because this is all telemetry information. Another way that I phrase it for informatica is the information is telemetry. It's data. It's information that you're getting from some source that's attenuated to that data set. That simple.
Yeah, it's like a television with different channels. You're picking up
Yeah.
the frequency, you turn into that frequency, then you pick that up. But you can't see it. You don't know it's there until you have the tools to for it to register for you.
And most people don't make the the delineation and distinction that, and this was, still people think this way, but
Mm-hmm.
somebody's hearing something over the radio and they go, I just have had enough of that. So they go there and smash the radio thinking that they've gotten rid of that message.
Right.
All they did was break the tool that was picking it up.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The voice is not on the phone. The picture is not in the television.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the monitor. It's not on the computer.
It's just there.
It's energy frequencies that are
Mm-hmm.
out there that these
Uh-huh.
devices are designed to pick up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
Let's all throw something out too. That's kind of what our brains are. We're just receivers. The information's
Mhm.
out there,
Mhm.
and people wonder about
Yeah.
our brain and our mind, and that's all our brain is. And us, we're just receivers,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and we choose the frequency in which we want to attune ourselves to.
Right.
and that, to me, is one of the fundamental aspects of what people experience and is known as non-local consciousness or remote viewing. And so
Yeah.
we'll get into a little bit of that.
Hmm.
So just again, an example, this is, they call it, see here, frequency waves per second. So they're measuring it in waves. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you mean like quantum theory does?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, you mean like how frequencies work?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you mean that's how energy expresses itself? Oh, these are all energies? What? Light and sound are the two most, I think, natural, or the two most prevalent characteristics of the expression of energy through frequencies
Yes, amplitudes and waves,
and
energy
modulation.
waves,
Yep.
modulation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's really, this is the whole electromagnetic spectrum that we currently know and understand, because everything on the other side of this little sweet spot that we can pick up, we wouldn't know that stuff was there unless we built toys and tools to go find it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And once we did, went, oh, look, we can go monitor and manage this little bit of information.
Just like Tesla's work.
Exactly.
I think at one time, though, Professor, we did when our collective consciousness was at a certain point early on. I think we did have the ability to see a lot more than we do now.
Mm-hmm. You mean like the Atlantean period, epoch?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
even before then,
Hmm.
if you want to take it all the way back to before
Yeah.
we were completely formed as humans. But I think we had the ability to see more in the spectrum than we do now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that our consciousness has shifted, and we've become more material, more into the materian.
Yeah.
And so we're not as sensitive to the subtle differences. in the octaves of these frequencies that we used to be more sensitive to. And I'll leave that
I
to
agree with
Robert to
that. Yeah,
continue.
yeah.
I know
I,
that's coming, Robert.
I totally agree with you. And in fact, I would posit that the frequencies of old,
Mhm.
when they occurred, the frequencies around them were different.
Yes.
So the ability um, to connect with, engage, work with different frequencies of energy were much easier to do because
Maybe evolve with it more.
there was a different state of all of the frequencies had a different harmonic resonance. It has the same characteristics, but there's a different resonance field of all of it. So as an individual, so again, the Atlanteans or even other cultures and other iterations of the humanoid expression had different frequency. They grew up in different frequency sets. They exist. You think about the whole idea of the concept of dinosaurs and large mammals.
Mhm.
I think part of the reason they were able to become as massive as they are is the frequencies of the earth at that time they enabled it. They were friendly to that expansion of energy and mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there may have been reason for the existence of those spectrums or those frequencies where now we don't have need of them. So it's not a matter of not being able to see. Maybe it's just that we don't need to because we've moved on to a higher evolution. And so we think of things differently, and the things that mattered to us then don't matter to us now.
Yeah, but we still use things like sound, and sound isn't even on this spectrum because sound would be something like 10 to the
True.
2,
Uh-huh.
10 to the 2, 10 to the 3 hertz,
Um,
right?
There he
And
goes.
sound is like the only medium, the only electromagnetic frequency that I know of that actually requires a physical medium to transmit through, just like waves in an ocean. It's like
Well,
no ocean, no water, no waves.
this one doesn't show it as well. So sound, at least in the way that we experience it with our ears and the acoustic, requires the air.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you can feel a sound frequency without it going through the air,
Sure.
right? Then you have things like they've developed the
neurophone.
Well, I was thinking of the large audio array. I think is the one that they use for crowd disruption.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Right. So you
Yes.
you can have a frequency that's so intense that it'll cause your ears to bleed. It will cause an effect within your biological system that will tip it sideways and take you out.
Years ago, I drove a school bus and I would get the most unruly kids on the bus. And the only way I could get their attention or get them to be quiet for just a second was to whistle as loud as I could. And it would just pierce the inside of the bus. And they would all just be stunned,
Yeah.
staring at me, going, "What was that?" And I'm like, well, now that I have your attention, you know, but you're right. It could be very disruptive.
And this one, I'm sorry, it's not as clear as it needs to be, but this is another point of the visible light and what that frequency is. We've got, when you start getting into ultraviolet and X-rays and gamma rays, that's the kind of stuff that especially the gammas, you can't see it. Look how short, and sweet it is.
Yep.
But it will take you out. It'll take everything out.
Oh yeah.
You get down into the cell phone range and all this stuff about this 5G microwave implementation. it's been fascinating to watch it get manipulated and used and abused. But it isn't. The only danger that it really has is the amplitude of it and how close you are to it.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, it does do a much better job at transmitting data. But 6G is right around the corner,
Mm-hmm.
and that's based on light.
Uh-huh.
So it's going to be even more interesting. And I think Musk is using the next gen of his Starlink is going to be using that technology as well. So now let's get into the matrix of the conscious mind and all the things that we've talked about as far as the metrics themselves, the way that consciousness is framed, the way that it's thought about, that it is, in my opinion, it creates everything. It is the reason for all. And we may experience it as a mind of our own personal experience, but we are from it in the sense of we are here because of it. And how we interpret that and then work with it determines our path and what kind of a journey we're going to have. So one of the things that you'll notice when you go down this 7 hermetic principles is that all of the quotes and the thoughts about reality have something of this list in them. And the hermetic principles are not anything other than, in my opinion, an observation of reality. So mentalism being the first one, well, that's consciousness. Everything comes from consciousness, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Correspondence, as above, so below, and so below, so above, is the interaction of that consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Vibration is what happens as it is one of its natures. Energy is a vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Polarity,
Constantly.
the duality of the ebb and the flow, the
Mm-hmm.
yin and the yang. Rhythm, constant motion moving forward in time.
Mm-hmm.
Cause and effect. If you move this, it's going to have this reaction. If it moves you, this reaction is going to occur. So as the art or the act of creation through our consciousness, understanding that there's going to be an effect from our intended cause is a really good piece of information.
Mm-hmm.
And then this whole concept of gender. How timely is this?
I know, right?
There seems to be, and to me, it's the polarity kind of concept, but there is this masculine, feminine energy construct that seems to be a regular habit of nature.
Mm-hmm.
I think that whoever made up this list of 7 hermetic principles, I think they just wanted to put that 7 in there because you could easily just get rid of 7.
Could have
Yeah.
left it was stopped at 6.
Yeah, you could easily get rid of 7 because that's covered in number 4 in polarity, right? But then again, you could also get rid of rhythm because that's the same thing as vibration, isn't it? And you could also get rid of cause and effect because that's the same thing as correspondence.
Well,
So in
I,
reality, you only need the first 3
the
or
thing
first
is,
2.
the thing is that all of them are just various degrees of adjustment between each. In other words, you need each one of those is a step towards your ability to manipulate. I don't want to use the word manipulate. I was saying this to Lori earlier. To take self-control over your experiences through each one of these 7 principles, because everything, if you think about it, is just 1 degree off of something else. It's all the same energy. It's just that there's just various differences in how they vibrate. And so polarity helps you determine what you like or what you don't like. Rhythm helps you with the forward motion. So everything goes together in a movement. It's just like being in a conductor and composing an orchestra. You have your strings and you have your flutes, and so it's how you orchestrate your reality is through these 7 principles, and how you tune into the various frequencies in between each flavor. I don't know if that
Yeah, I
made
could
any
see.
sense.
Yeah, I could see it.
It
Yeah.
did.
That
Okay.
made
How you?
sense,
One is
Lori.
basically what you're saying is that every one of them is derived from the previous one. So like
Yeah,
number
you
2 is derived from number 1, number 3 is derived from number 2, and so on and so forth. But in that
the
case,
whole principle of mentalism enables you to influence all the other laws. And it's the ability for you to navigate through the mental plane.
well, then exactly as Rocky Stucci once said it, that there should be an 8th one that's called something like focus, right?
Yeah, that's the Stooge. Yeah,
Mhm.
Focus.
he's right. He's right. He's
Hmm.
right. Uh huh.
Well,
Yeah.
Delaware, I thought you were going to go. In fact, you just about did go full George Carlin with that
Yeah.
breakdown
Yeah.
there.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
You know, you've heard his bit on the Ten Commandments, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going, man, he's killing it.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Hmm.
No, I see a mental plane of existence, a physical plane, spiritual plane. They're all part of the same, but there are various degrees between, and how you navigate through one through the others through these principles of Hermeticism. And I don't think you want to throw any of them out. I think they're all tools that we use to do that navigation.
To me, these are all just measurements of the metrics.
Yeah,
Each one is a metric, and it has its
yeah,
own characteristics. And you can, if you're aware of it, you can see its habits and its nature and what it does.
right.
And
That's true.
you can see how one influences or has some kind of influence or bearing on another.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so to me, when I just looked at this after I looked at Hermetic principles and the Kabbalion years ago, and then I got into the Informatica and I started going at it, and then I stumbled on the principles again. I went, holy shit! here's a base set of metrics for measurement in the construct of reality. Okay, let's put it in. Now, the characteristics of consciousness, again, we've mentioned a little bit of these, but from my perspective, one of the top characteristics of consciousness is that it's in a constant creation mode. There's just always creation going on. And when we get into the processes of how consciousness and the mind works, we'll see this correlation, I think. But there's a constant there's a constant creation process. That creation process creates frequencies of energies. That's the energy, and those frequencies are the nature of consciousness. It's always in motion. There are cycles within cycles that create patterns that result in novelty.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound right to
That's
you, Karen?
very
Yeah.
elegantly stated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a
exactly.
good way
That's
of
what
saying it. Yeah.
creates the novelty. Yeah. And in the future, we're not going to. I don't want to get into it right now, but as we expand and dig deeper, I actually want to get to the concept that I came to the conclusion that there actually is no duality. But we'll cover that at another point because it's quite complex.
Yeah.
So we'll do that another day. But it's an extension of this actually. So when you get to the point of realizing about there's no duality, that it cannot exist unless it's actually a full circuit within this reality. So it does not really. Anyways, we'll get into that in the future.
Subjective to the observer's experience.
I love this constant creation, energy frequencies, always in motion, cycles within cycles, patterns, novelty.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the matrix. Mm-hmm.
Those to me are the characteristics, nature, and habits of consciousness, which is reality to me. And it is, going back to the whole idea of a monad, it is subjective to the observer's experience.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And it is the arena of imagination, possibilities, potentials, and probabilities. Now, this is important from the standpoint of we were talking about the New Age folks and some of the
Yeah.
some of the challenges that I personally have with some of the constructs and the
Yeah.
narradimes that they're putting out there. But
Yeah.
so the one of them being, you got to go connect with the one. It's like, no, yeah, you already are the one. You're already connected. You just got to clear the crap and get
Right.
to the
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
Feeling trapped. You feeling trapped. You're stuck in a cycle. Break the cycle.
Right.
Recognize the pattern.
So
Always stay in motion. You can use all of these to
Yeah. And then by recognizing
manage
the
the matrix.
pattern, you
Yeah.
go to the next one and you create your new novelty, you see.
Right.
Yeah. I
It's
concur.
right in the list.
Exactly.
Because that's how you create your novelty, is by breaking your
Exactly.
patterns and creating new patterns.
So that whole thing about go connect with the one just grinds my gears, and the other one is
Yeah.
be in the now.
Oh yeah.
You must be present in the now, and this is in
I'm always in the
Buddhism,
now.
and I mean, I love Brother Tolle, but I mean, the being in the now thing, it's like, no, there is no now. You are always in the
You're
future.
already-
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
You are
That's true.
always the now is the
Yeah.
now was.
Yeah.
What is the future. What is
Right.
the possibilities, the potentials,
Yeah.
and the probabilities. We are all always in a predictive state of mind.
Yes.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you can't be in the now.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
always out there.
Yeah.
So if once you have that, once you break free of the now, like breaking free of the going and finding the plug for the one, I went, oh, okay, now that's a lot easier.
Well, Robert, you're always expanding. You're forever growing. you're forever making progress one way or the other. Whether you perceive it to be good or bad, the point is that it's you're always in motion. That's the whole key here. And the other thing that I like about what you've proposed here tonight is it resonates totally with my feelings that I'm responsible for everything, not something else. I wasn't pulled into this universe by against my will. I wasn't shoved into a matrix and plugged in like Neo in the movie Matrix. I'm not being set up to be somebody's fertilizer or chicken feed to feed their... I just can't even go there with any of this because, and when you look at this, it's so beautifully constructed. We freaking created this and constructed this.
Yeah.
We created these matrices. We created the laws that we live through and navigate through them.
Each one of us
beautifully laid out. Beautifully laid out.
Yeah,
agreed.
Each one of us is here like of their own free will, of their own accord, and
Sovereign
each one
beings.
of us lives our own. We each live our own lives based on our own principles.
Right. You feel like you're trapped. You want to break free from the matrix. The matrix is you. It's your consciousness.
Yeah, basically.
It's your mind.
You got the keys. Use them.
So you've got the keys. Just flip your script, people.
Yep.
Yeah, sometimes it's not that obvious, though. Sometimes it's not that obvious.
Yeah, I know. But if you buy into all these other explanations and reasonings, and it's like you take you give your sovereignty away, you give your power away, you give your personal responsibility away, because you're looking for something external to blame it on. There's nothing external to you.
Take responsibility.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's keep mulling through here.
Keep it moving.
Okay, So all of that we just went through has it goes through individual and collective processes, linear yet circular yet fluid motion in the way that we experience thought and how we think. So one of my pet peeves, I've been yarping on about it for the last few years, is, when they replaced how to think with what to think in not only the school system and the education and the academics, we started going downhill fast.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole, to your point, Teresa, accountability, responsibility, awareness, the sense of self-examination, and understanding that you and you alone are responsible for you, because there is no other you.
Mhm.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So all of that, the just the terrible way in which language has been recapitulated, manipulated, abused, carefully curated, and crafted.
That's why they made freedom of speech the First Amendment, because
I
it's
don't
the
know, those
most important.
brothers, I don't know, they were dialed in somewhere. Yay for them,
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So what this is, so to me, there's a process of the mind. There's a process of thinking. And that's why I call it the process system of the mind. First of all, we are pattern recognition oriented. Okay.
Yeah.
We learn from analogies.
Mhm.
We are analogous in our learning because we see patterns, which are metrics of
Mhm.
something.
Yep.
Okay. And we relate it to something else. Right. And so we have, there becomes some kind of mapping to some other experience, and we just keep accumulating those. We end up this great big map of matrix. But that's the first way in which we learn. We don't learn from language. We don't learn from knowledge. We learn from what we see and what we feel, and that there's a pattern to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So our base learning and experience with reality, which is learning is constant because we're always experiencing reality, is a process methodology or process model based on patterns. The second thing that we do, because of those patterns, we understand them and how we interact. What's the resonance that we experience with them? And we have preferences that fall out of that. Preferences that we like, preferences that we don't, biases that we just a bias. This is another example of the hijack language. Being biased is, well, you can't be biased. No, that's how we are. That's our nature.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
can't take that away from the experience of the human, or you're going to have trouble.
Mhm.
The human machine and that meat suit is not going to react well. It's going to fall over at some point. And I'll just take a little sidebar here. About 12 years ago, my daughters had, it was at least that, they had graduated high school and they were living with me in Atlanta. And they were, going through the dating thing, and I got to vet both of my son-in-laws, and I hit the lotto in the son-in-law draw. These two guys are just, I couldn't ask for anything more from, taking care of my own daughters. But I was vacuuming one day and I came up with this. I said, there's 5 words that seem to be screwed up. And entitlement, deserve, and earned, and then judge and offense. And I'm thinking, well, why did those words pop into my head? And they started rolling around and bouncing around each other on my noggin. And you think about earning something. Earn is typically something that you get as the result of effort put into something, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's just been softened and, created. People don't think that they have to put anything in to earn anything anymore. Then you have deserve, kind of similar to earn. Oh, I deserve that. Why do you deserve that? Well, because of X, Y, and Z. Well, I don't know. You kind of have to earn something to deserve it. But deserve is, again, it's a subjective one that's been taken advantage of and hijacked. Because you exist, you deserve. I don't know about that. And then entitled. Entitled is kind of like the first two, but now it's like, well, just because of X, Y, and Z, I am entitled. Not that I deserve it or that I earned it. I'm just entitled. It's like that. Those three, I think, have changed the perception of what Teresa was talking about in the accountability and responsibility aspect of self-value, self-management. So then we get to offense and judge. Well, you're told, first of all, you can't judge anybody. It's like, well, no, that's, you judge every time you turn on your brain, you turn on your mind. When you think, you're making judgment. Just because we've assigned positions and put people into these roles and given them capes and being the arbiters of being judges and placing judgment, passing judgment. No, that's reserved for the individual.
I agree with that.
That is something that you do every time you think. Whether you call it that or not, you're making a judgment on it. And the last one is the offense. Well, you can't offend anyone. What do you mean you can't offend anyone? What does offense mean? Offense means that for whatever reason, you're not acting, you're not reacting and having a response to something that you like. You don't like it. I am offended by that. Why are you offended? Well, because it makes me feel this way. Why does it make you feel that way? Well, it's because that's the way I think about it. Well, okay. So aside from the fact that your thinking apparently needs to be upgraded, let's get over to your reaction side. And why is it that your emotional, psychological, and physical reaction requires me to manage your inability to manage your emotional, physical, psychological reaction?
How am I responsible for the way you think?
Right.
Well, 30 years ago, you could have added the word discrimination, right? But I would contend that that's another word that's been messed around with, because you need to discriminate in your mind. You need to be able to filter. Discrimination essentially means filtering. You need to be able to filter the good information from the bad information from the junk, right? Because not all information is useful information. Not all
discernment.
Of it is, not all of it is relevant to your situation. I mean, you could you could have a problem with your car, but it's of no use to know like some random Chinese word, for example. No, that's not useful knowledge at that point.
My big one is that the word to be governed. When you become responsible, become an adult, and you have full responsibility of yourself as a entity on this planet, reality, or whatever, when I take offense to government or being governed. I have a real problem with that.
Yeah,
same here.
I think a lot of us do.
Yeah, so
same here.
no, really, that's the big issue.
Yeah, no, I agree.
When you get to the point that you just can't do it anymore. You can't be governed in any way.
Right.
Same here, because we're taxed without our consent, and that tax money is being spent without our consent.
I'm just talking about anything to
yeah.
do with governments and anybody that wants to govern other people, or people that need to be governed.
Yeah, it's really an authoritative establishment or construct that gives whatever it's got authority over its rules and its boundaries and all of that. So anyway, when I got into those 5 words, I mulled on them. I was vacuuming. When I do chores, that's my Zen zone, and that's when I go think. So I'll vacuum, do dishes, whatever, do dogs, whatever, and I get into this. So it rolled around on my noggin, and my daughter came home that night with her boyfriend, and I sat him down, and I said, "Now listen to this. I got to get it out." And they just sat there, and they were in their early 20s, and they just went, I think I understand what you're saying. Now, my oldest daughter, I could see the light go off. But anyway,
This is so empowering, Robert, because thought is the operating system.
Language is
And
the operating system.
and
we're
thought,
getting to that.
well, thought
Mhm.
language is how we express thought, but thought is the operating system so that we can interface with all the other layers of being. And I think I wrote this down. I can't find it now, but it enables us to anticipate all other natural energetic laws. We can cause them to occur at will, at our will, our free choice, in ways that benefit us. So everything, all phenomena, is the science of the universe. We are navigating it through our mental thought. So we are the programmer and the operator
Mhm.
of our code.
Mhm.
Writer,
Yes.
director, producer.
Hmm. Writer, producer, main
But
actress
these
or
are the
actor.
what
Yeah.
he's laid out here. What he's laid out here are the individual components
Yep.
of that operating system.
This is to me, and you can see that there's correlation to not only the the thinkers and the
Mhm.
metrics themselves, but to hermetic principles. People don't realize that we are pattern recognition. We have these preferences, biases, and
Uh,
resonance and peccadillos that are unique because they resonate with us in whatever way for whatever reason. And sometimes you find stuff that resonates and then later on it don't. It's a constant movement forward in constant movement. And there's a pulse, rhythm, and a vibration to the way that we think.
yes. Yes.
Mhm.
And the way that
Yeah.
we think is predictive with potentiality. It portends and it projects. That's why we're never in the now. We're always in there. We're always in this place. And then we use recall and memory to go back and check, see how the hell we did. Or if there's new
Uh-huh.
data that we need to add to the state of the change of the system and the state of that
Yeah.
system. How we doing on time?
We're getting close to 2
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm good. You guys tell me. I think I've probably got maybe another 30 minutes, but it
Okay.
all depends on how much y'all interrupt me.
Go for it. It's Friday night. I got time. If
It's
anybody
Friday
needs
night.
to pop out, it's all good. But
They
I'm
know they
game.
can always come back and watch the
Yep,
rest. Yeah.
I'm
Keep
game.
keep going. Keep
Mhm.
going.
Grandpa Brian, you've been kind of quiet over there. Have you got any thoughts, or am I putting you to sleep?
I have really learned a lot tonight. But get back to earlier what you were saying about everything has consciousness. I believe that not only does everything have consciousness, but at one point in time, we have been that consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I do have a question for you. When you was over in Japan, did you learn anything about Reiki when you were doing the acupressure?
Yeah, we in order to get the certification to be a shiatsu practitioner, we had to do Eflaraj, Swedish, Reiki, uh, because it wasn't just doing these meridians and the points. We did full therapy. We did massage and hot stones. I mean, all kinds of, in fact, even a little bit of yoga, but we had to add the herbology. So yes, I'm familiar with it. And I actually did have a Reiki session when I was over there, I think the second time. Just, it's like, wow. It's like, I love sushi and I've had sushi all over the US. But when I had sushi in Tokyo, with just 2 blocks from the bay by these little old Japanese guys that were just have been doing it for decades, it was like, oh, whoa.
Yeah,
I
I
just
spent
can't
some
bring
time in
myself to
Japan,
do
and the sushi
sushi.
over there is
Oh,
amazing.
yeah, I love sushi.
Oh,
I could never get into it. I
I
just
Oh.
couldn't
couldn't
do it.
just.
Yeah.
There's only one or two things I can tolerate, and the rest of it I just.
No.
I say
I mean, hey,
no,
look at it this way.
no.
My last name rhymes with sushi, so
Yep.
Sushi.
yeah.
Well, Brian, thank you for those comments. I'm glad you're getting something or hearing something out of this that might make some sense. Because right now, this is my interpretation at this point. There's a whole bunch more that this goes into, so I'm trying to keep I'm trying to keep this at
You're doing
a
fine, Robert.
Yep,
You're doing
you're doing
high
fine.
just
enough
fine.
level.
Yep.
Yeah.
So please don't hesitate to jump in and ask any questions. I'm going to see if I can get through this in about 20, 30 minutes here. We're getting close to the end. So anyway, this is an important part of understanding the construct and the way that consciousness, the way its habits and its nature and the way that it functions works, because we are experiencing that through these processes. And it's not based on, again, anything other than an empirical, what I call a personal empirical reality. Now, Delamore, as you mentioned,
Oh, yeah.
the language that is used determines how your mind, the kinds of programs and things that are going to occur in the constructs of your mind. So it creates an operating system on top of the mind. It can affect and even supplant the natural functionings of consciousness and mind, but those kind of go on so that you can adopt and you can find a language to operate your mind. So symbols, letters, sounds, words, information constructs is
Sure.
what a language does.
And these also change your perception of reality and indirectly change that reality because, for example, different languages are written different ways. And the way you make out a symbol, the way you write a symbol, if it's written from left to right, if a language is written from left to right, that means that the writer is naturally right-handed or tends to be right-handed. That means left-brained. If it's written from right to left, that means a left-handed writer, which means somebody with a dominant right brain. If it's written top to down, it also shows something different about the perception of the writer. Same thing if it's written in phonetic letters like we write English or most Western languages versus pictures or symbols or stylized pictograms like Chinese, which also points to a different perception of reality. And uh, uh, in a sense, you could say that the Chinese perception is a bit more right brained and a bit more holistic than the Western perception, which divides everything down into individual sounds, where each letter is a sound. So, it's a different style of thinking, which, like I said, indirectly influences the reality that it delineates.
And therein lies one of the really profound aspects of the knowledge set of language, in that in some cultures, in many cultures, like for example, the technology that I was doing in the 90s, I had to my software was translated into 14 different languages, including multibyte, which is what you need for the Eastern characters, kanji and Mandarin, Hangul. And double byte means that the computer has to have an extra set of bytes to display that character, because they originally wrote it without necessarily taking that into account. Another example is the word student here in the United States has a corollary in kanji, but it's called K-A. Okay. Well, it means a lot more than our student, our definition of student. A student that they use ka in kanji in Japan means a student of it, not a student for it. So
But then again, the Japanese doesn't just use kanji. Japanese also uses katakanga, which is basically like a phonetic way of spelling out foreign words that you don't have a symbol for in kanji.
And just like in China, you have Mandarin and Cantonese.
Mm-hmm.
You and I listen to it and look at it and go, I can't tell the difference. They don't understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
They have to
Wow.
use language, another language, English, in a lot of cases, or even French, so that they can talk. But you and I listen to it and go, it sounds the same to me. I don't know what's going on here. They do not understand each other. It's that profound. So this is why I think this is an important distinction to make in the way that the mental processes work. You have to realize that the language that's defined in your mind for the way you interact with the reality you inhabit is going to be instrumental in the way that you engage with it and how your interaction goes. And so it's important to know. And again, it's important because it's defined by the belief system and culture in time and place, whatever that might be. And it also goes to expressions. I mean, there are expressions. You see a lot of this in this sci-fi movies, but it's a real thing. Somebody in a Aboriginal culture might be expressing a real attraction or a real love of something, and it looks like they're really angry. It's like, no, that's just the way they express that
Yeah.
attraction.
Like how Italians speak. They speak with their
there's
hands.
another one. Right?
Yep.
Constantly, yeah, constantly work hands on, yeah.
Okay, so another way to look at everything we've talked about is that the mind is ethereal, conscious energy, and it's connected and integrated to the material, to us. It's not tethered necessarily, but it is connected and integrated. The brain is not the mind. The brain is the nervous system organ. It happens. So if you think about everything, we are electrical. We have electrical energy that is a part of the biology, the way that we function. And the mind and conscious is electrical energy. Well, you've got the neuroscientists and all these people that are doing these tests. And they go, well, we think we found a memory. We saw a dream fire off in a brain. It's like when you saw the electrical interaction,
the synaptic response, yes.
But you did not see the dream. You did not see the memory. You did not see the vision. You didn't see any of that. You saw the electrical interaction.
Electrical impulse.
That's it.
That's the same thing as saying, well, we didn't see the guy eat the corn, but we saw it in his feces.
Thank you, Galibor.
Same analogy.
That was a great visual break. Thank you very much.
Very generic.
Thank you, Galibor.
So the brain, the mind is in and around the body. The consciousness energy is a part of our entire physical being, our entire biology. But it is a unique expression of consciousness within this material. In other words, if you think of consciousness, it's nature's energy, and the energy is expressed by frequencies. Universe comes out of all of that, all the material that we know, all the dimensions that we think we know, all of the portals we think we know, all of that are frequencies from the energy of consciousness. So who are we? What are we? I used to describe it as, for those of us that go back far enough to the 2000 election and the whole controversy in Florida and all of this stuff on the votes and everything. Dangling chads, right?
Yeah.
So the analogy is we are dangling chads of consciousness. We are a frequency stamp. We are a unique ID that's been stamped in the frequency set of energy of consciousness. That makes that unique stamp is its own monad. It is its own signature, its own stamp in consciousness of existing in reality. So the mind is the unique expression of consciousness, and that's what makes us all who we are as individuals. That if the etheric energy is expressed into the brain, but as we'll get into in the frequency physics, that's not the only place that the mind and consciousness can go or is. The brain is only central to the physical expression of the mind. It's not required. The brain is required for that expression of the conscious mind and that energy that animates us. That's always in the process of creation. So the mind uses that brain-body connection, and it, through the biology, the chemistry, and all of the electricity that we are, that's how it manifests. But the mind is not biologically dependent.
Nope.
And it goes on. It lives on.
Oh, yeah.
And on.
Now I'm going to go through this kind of quick just to make a point.
All right.
For most of our prehistory, all cultures and belief systems thought of existence as all of it being conscious, all of it being alive, right? Everything, whether it had varying degrees, but it was degrees of difference, not separation. It's degrees of difference. So you have big C in the creative consciousness, you have little c down at an ant. And then we're somewhere in between. So as our ancients and ancestors looked at the world around them, they thought, hell, everything's got a spirit. Everything's got a consciousness. You got gods across the plant and animal kingdom to the all of nature and the atmosphere and the earth and the stars and the heavens and the planets, and everything was conscious. And that's one of the reasons they started naming everything after whatever god they thought that they had
and
come
worshiping it.
and worshiping.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole of is the sun conscious?
Well, is that because nothing can exist in this realm without being conscious? There would be they couldn't even exist here without it. So I guess in that respect.
That's my opinion.
Different energy aspects of consciousness, yes.
Yeah.
But my
because
point
if it exists, it has some kind of consciousness, or else it wouldn't be here.
It, to me, and that goes to this whole this paradigm going on with artificial intelligence and sentience and all that stuff. In my understanding, consciousness requires being organic. It requires being an organism. An organism with self-organizing intent and desire and motivation. You can't put that on a piece of software and hardware. It's just not going to happen. You can't program organics into something that's non-organic. So up until a certain point in time, everything was considered to be organic and alive. All life was living. That living life had some level of degree of consciousness in it. How did they know that, or why did they say it? Because they experienced it, either physically or with, some type of ritual or mental process, doing meditations, mystical realms, psychoactive substances. I mean, there's all these different ways in which the access to this conscious realm have been used to determine what's going on here. Well, it looks like everything's alive. Everything has a mind, a consciousness.
Mhm.
Now, this changed in the Age of Reason and with the rise of scientism, in the mechanistic model. So I wanted to show this simply because this gives kind of a not a complete but a pointed timeline of where some of the philosophies happened over time. And the key one here is Rene Descartes. This guy right here. And there were some other great ones. Bacon was awesome. There was a lot of great stuff that came out. But this guy really took and pushed the idea of the mechanistic model of reality. And this is what precipitated the materialistic, mechanistic model of science we have today, which is one of the really important things from my perspective of understanding the informatica and the metrics so that you can see this stuff and either navigate around it or dismiss it or whatever. But it's the big framework filter that's keeping the esoteric, mystic arts, mystery school reality of consciousness from everybody being able to access it, because they've put a clamp on it.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now, what happened is they separated consciousness from the concept in philosophy of the physical experience. So Descartes said, well, everything in nature is mechanical. It's all mechanistic. So it doesn't have a purpose other than its mechanism of the way it exists, but it doesn't have a soul, doesn't have any conscience, no spirit, no nothing. None of the esoteric stuff. Didn't have any consciousness.
Yeah.
So what scientism did with this, it's essentially Cartesian dualism, is they gave all of the angels, the spirits, which they didn't think really existed, the mind and God to the church, and nature they took over and they said, we know all this stuff now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because they got into math and they thought, well, math, look, we figured out these things with math, and math must be the mind of God because the universe looks like it was created by a geometer with incredible engineering skills who put everything together, pushed the start button, and just stood back, and it's supposed to go on its own. Well, because we have discovered math, we now are connected to the mind of God. And mathematicians really like that because it's like, hey, who's closer to God?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that separation is what gave us the model, the majority of the model we have today. Materialism came along later and took away gods and all the invisible stuff and said, well, that shit just doesn't exist. You can't measure it. You can't see it. You can't weigh it. So it doesn't exist.
Robert, it was manifested because it was foretold. It was predicted back in the ancient days that it would occur.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you think about, you bring about. And so empowerment was given to the scientists, the alchemists,
well,
to make that a part of consciousness,
well,
universal consciousness.
One of the things about that approach is if you look at technology and the advances we have from a scientific materialistic perspective, it's done a really good job. I mean, we're doing this because of what they went after to understand and delineate and construct.
Yeah.
So it's done a lot of really good, amazing stuff. So it's even easier for people to believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for it to say that it is the arbiter, the one who passes judgment and validation and everything else on whatever the knowledge domain is, that's where it falls apart. That's where the individual responsibility and accountability to validate the information that you use to navigate and experience your reality. If you give it to somebody else that has a really bad track record, it's a shame on you because you didn't go check out that track record. And my little rant on that is the last 3 years, anybody with a 3-letter acronym tattooed on the ass end of their name or as a expert are the first ones I'm skeptical of because every one of them across all domains failed miserably.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
They failed and look at economics and the weather.
mm-hmm.
These are two knowledge disciplines, fields of study, and professions that are wrong all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good
Yet they're
point.
on TV and they're getting paid. And I mean,
Yep.
I would want that job if I wasn't so just resonating with the knowing truth,
Mm-hmm.
knowing the essence of the resonance. I want to know that. I want to
Yeah.
know the science behind the science.
There you
Well,
go.
see, yeah, nowadays the scientists want technology to replace the gods, so to speak. And, they've also changed the meaning of science, where nowadays, if you're scientific, you believe in some guy on TV.
Well, I mean,
Right?
and when you think about it, you start getting into some of these various disciplines, scientific disciplines, quantum mechanics, theory, computing, string theory, multiverse, omniverse, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
You look at it, you go, well, it looks like a bunch of mathematical masturbation, number one. Number two, apparently all of the math models, men and machines that you've tossed at these things have produced results that are you sure that you want to go with that again? Because every time it has an output, it doesn't come to fruition the way that you predicted, because you're predicting based on the men, math models, and machines that this is going to be the outcome. Well, basically, I heard Joseph Farrell say this. They were talking about the difference between the mystics and the esoterics and modern science. And you look at tensor calculus, which is what they use to design all the rocketry and landing and orbital stuff and all of that. And then you get into this, string theory and all these theoretical things. And they're trying to figure out how to define consciousness, which they haven't and they can't. And its consciousness is known as the hard problem in all disciplines, whether it's psychology or physics, doesn't matter. Because nobody's got a definition for it. Nobody can explain it. It's like electricity. We use electricity all the time. We know how to harness it. You can cook a man with it and you can cook his meal with it. But there's no definition of what electricity is. There is no definition of its source.
But at the same time, they know that it's very powerful, because why else would they design first double-blind experiments, even using animals, right? I mean, and then design triple-blind experiments where, which goes to show you that there is some observer effect based on consciousness on the outcome of an experiment.
That's the whole problem with consciousness, is the observer effect. Once you observe something, you've changed the system state.
Yep.
And that's why Schrodinger's wave equation, the whole idea behind this quantum model is whatever you're modeling, you has to be under observation, or it has to be mathematically modeled. So Farrell was saying, he said, well, basically, if you look at, today's physics and all of the theoretical models and stuff, it looks like they're just trying to do esoteric knowledge with math. They're trying to explain what the esoterics said. Well, this is the way it is. And everybody's going, well, I don't know. It apparently is, because it keeps happening, but nobody can explain it. Well, these guys are just taking a bunch of math and models and equations and throwing it at all of these things and saying, well, it must look like this. This is what time travel will look like. This is what a wormhole would look like. This is what the collapse of the wave function happens when the observer is involved. So it gets really complex, and people get wound up and lost in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just saying, go back to the nut of the nugget. What is the metrics in the matrix that you're dealing with? And have you sufficiently taken responsibility and accountability for your own understanding of the awareness experience that you have? Because it's not rocket science. It doesn't take meditation. It doesn't take transcendental stuff. It doesn't take injections. It doesn't take anything. It's just being cognizant of the experience you have in your mind, having self-examination, having that conversation with yourself. So now that was the metrics of the conscious mind. Now I'm just going to show you what frequency physics are, and then an overview of informatica, and hopefully in one slide. So there seems to be a field of frequencies that is common among our human experience. It seems to be a shared reality because we all seem to function in it. That's how we're able to communicate with one another, create individually or collectively, do whatever it is we do, go to the store, not run into somebody, There's this reality of frequencies that we all share. And around those frequencies is the etherium and the materium, because the frequencies are what manifest the materium. The etherium is where the frequencies and consciousness and those energies exist. But I was talking about telemetry earlier, and telemetry is nothing more than a data stream. It can be from anything. It can be an empirical personal one, it can be from a device and a toy and technology. It's information. What's interesting to me is that in the ESO and exoteric telemetry realms, and I just listed just the top ones that came off the top of my head, but these are all different ways in which information about this frequency set and the extensions of it outside of its normal band. I mean, there is just some amazing stuff that happens on that side of the telemetry set. In the scientific telemetry, this is pretty much all what they're limited to. This is what they use to determine the reality that they tell us exists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know about y'all, but the more data streams I got, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially
Yeah.
when you can get into things that become non-local consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
this goes back to what Dalbor was saying a minute ago about placebos. Okay. Nobody can explain placebo effect, but it is mandatory in our sciences for pharmaceutical development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think people think about that and realize that, well, that was just a placebo. Well, when you say that, what do you mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, general
It's
definition
not
is
real.
a placebo is you thought you got something that you didn't, but it still worked.
Yeah.
Okay, now I don't know about y'all, but I got questions.
Yeah.
Going back to Feynman, I got questions here. Non-local consciousness. The guys, Dick Allgaier, Daz Smith, Edward Reardon, all the guys, Ed Lynn Buchanan. If you haven't seen Third Eye Spies, Russell Targ's documentary, highly recommended. It's all about the SRI with him and Hal Puthoff back in the 70s and
Ingo
how they all
Swann.
got started. Ingo Swann, yeah. Joe McMoneagle, Pat Price. I mean, this is documented. It's not Oh, we thought somebody was in a room. We heard it from no, this is thoroughly scientifically in the scientific
Mhm.
method documented data. Anybody got an explanation for any of that data that's documented and verified and demonstrable? It's empirical.
I think the
Well,
trust
there's all
factor
kinds.
comes up. Do
Well,
you
Yeah,
trust it?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
well, if it's been vetted and validated through a scientific methodology and process, and it's empirical data that anybody can go look at, I don't know. I kind of like that kind of set of circumstances. Placebo, uh, remote viewing, non-local consciousness. What is this? What happens with this chemical reaction of psychoactive substances, DMT, MDMA, ayahuasca, psilocybin? I mean, what is it in those chemicals and the reaction to that our body and mind has to that is such a profound effect on consciousness? Nobody really knows. Is it documented? Oh yeah, people. In fact, there are states now that are California and Colorado have legalized mycelium and psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's been demonstrably proven to alleviate PTSD, depression, addiction. Okay, well, but wait a minute. The government says those things are illegal, and the government's wrong. Clearly,
Yeah.
Mhm.
clearly, maybe the intention when they first did it, and I know that it's not, or at least the data I've seen just proves that it was nothing more than a control mechanism. The data has been available for decades that the psychoactive properties that I just mentioned have had profound effects in changing the minds of people that had some kind of mind problem.
Well, it
It's
enabled them to tap into the frequencies they wouldn't otherwise normally be able to tap into. They're able to
I
read more, see more, experience more.
the opening of the mind through the biological and chemical interaction is little understood, if at all. I mean, anesthesia is another example of something that they know it works, but they can't tell you why it works.
Mm-hmm.
Same with hypnosis.
Now, that would be the one area that I would agree is something that's more or less controlled outside of self, because throughout the ages, as they got to know more about, as medical science got to know more about human brain functions, they ignorantly, perhaps, or maybe even deliberately, tried to prevent people from tapping into all of these esoteric telemetry
Mm-hmm.
data, because they saw it as something that was anti-religious, anti-God, and
It was
they
anti their control.
anti
Mm-hmm.
their
Right.
control and
There you go.
psychotic. So they took everything
Mm-hmm.
and put it into psychology, which I don't see over here under scientific telemetry. Psychology would be another one, and it's a major factor because it can be used as a control mechanism to
Oh, big
control
time.
what other people are thinking about and feeling and
Mhm.
experiencing. So that would be the one area that I would say is something that's acceptable to controllers outside of our will.
Well, and to me, that's why all of that telemetry under the exoteric column, those are all just more metrics in the matrix, and they
Hmm.
each provide a different read, a different data set of the information of the energies that are going on.
Right, right.
I mean,
Yeah.
astrology right now, I mean, there's some major stuff going on up in the heavens in those cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But, but
tarot
with
reading, I mean, all these divination.
Mm-hmm.
We are able to divine into consciousness. We are
Yeah.
able to look forward. We are able to ask and interact with it on our behalf.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the thing. All those esoteric telemetry systems, those are things that each individual can do on his own. Whereas the scientific stuff, like just think about all the different colliders that they're building. Like, can any of us afford like this super collider that's like 36 kilometers wide or whatever that they're building now? No. Most of the established scientificalist science is outside of the range of normal human ability to even relate to.
Well, that's outside the normal access and reach of normal people.
Exactly,
But
like
with
CERN.
the advent of this communication system called the internet that we
Mhm.
are using, I mean, the accessibility to information, to more metrics in the matrix, is like it's never been before, and it's only going to
True.
get even more intense. Well, we have our last slide, and we can go, holy shit. So this is the overview of informatica. So informatica starts with consciousness, which has energy frequencies, which is the nature of consciousness.
Mhm,
Those frequencies create the materium,
mhm.
which creates the universe.
Yes.
From within the universe, life, organic manifestations of individual species of different styles and types of life arise. We know of carbon because that's where we are. We've seen, we think, some silica, which is another compound, another mineral.
Mhm.
And then there's other, which we don't even know about yet.
Yeah.
But at least this flow of consciousness and frequencies into the materium, creating the universe from which life comes out in the carbon format, we get humanoids. And it does seem, depending on what data you look at, but for whatever reason, it seems like all these different alien species and these other entities and so forth have a habit of being in a humanoid form. Even if they're reptilian or they're
It's so
something else,
efficient.
they've got heads, arms, legs,
Mhm. Very
torsos, and
efficient form.
right.
Yep.
So there's
Mhm.
this humanoid construct that seems to be a habit of consciousness of the universe. But for our discussion here, that from the humanoid construct comes the theologies, philosophies, and sciences, which are the things that we've been talking about as far as metrics in the matrix.
Mhm.
And out of those three basic, there's other delineations and variations, but this is the three main food groups, if you will.
Mhm.
We get experience, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and then enlightenment, which is to me is kind of a habit, a nature of the progress of our experience. We have an experience and then we have knowledge from that experience. Once we have knowledge, when we ponder it, we can gain understanding of that knowledge. You can
Mhm.
know something and not understand it,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
But once you go through the understanding process, you gain what we would call wisdom. You're able to assemble all these different, from your monad, all these different metrics that you've collected, and you can look at them and go, I think I understand, and I have some kind of wisdom about this.
Mhm.
Settings testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep. Teresa is there. Hello.
Yep.
She
Yep.
go.
Got her.
There she is. Hey, Teresa. So, and then eventually that becomes you eventually get to this thing called enlightenment, and this is in pretty much all different philosophies and theologies and belief systems. But the cool thing is, a bolt from the blue can happen at any point along this without having to go through the previous one. You can have knowledge of something without having the experience, but having experience makes that knowledge more tangible.
Mhm.
You can get understanding of something like that without having knowledge or experience of it. You can have wisdom. All of a sudden, you just go, oh, no, I know now. But there was no experience, knowledge, or understanding prior to that wisdom. And the most common one that we hear about is enlightenment. All of a sudden, and you think about the word enlighten. So the light comes on, or you become illuminated.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yep.
So that, my friends, is informatica.
Interesting. Very, very
Mhm.
interesting. Fascinating too. It's a lot to absorb. And it's an interesting, you presented it in a very succinct manner, but not the most simplest of terms.
Right?
Uh-huh. You really get people thinking, that's for sure. But yeah, fascinating stuff. Wow. Well, a very good discussion. We went 2 hours and 30 minutes. So yeah, there's a lot to absorb here, no doubt about it. But fascinating subject. Really, really appreciated your time and energy on this, Professor Bauer. The chat room really enjoyed the show too. Lots of information to absorb, and we're just very thankful that you're here with us tonight. And we'll go ahead and any last thoughts, anybody?
Just had a great time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, most definitely. Yep.
I would
Yes,
say
thank you so much.
Thank you so
I,
much
w-
for your
I
knowledge.
would mangle I would mangle a Woody Allen quote here and say, um, "Don't forget to save old bits of string theory."
That's funny. I love
Well,
that.
I like the idea that, you don't have to think of the Matrix in the way that a lot of people in the new age are thinking about, that something's missing or something's lacking, or that
Mhm.
you have to escape it. And if you do believe that you need to try to change things, start believing in yourself, number one,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
find your passion and
Mhm.
then follow your passion. And don't worry about what other people think about you or what other people tell you. They're trying to put their frame onto you. So the
Yeah.
minute
Don't.
you let go of what other people think and
Mhm.
that you're being judged, I don't give a flying doo-doo what somebody thinks about me. Once you let go of that, then
Yeah.
you have all kinds of freedom, and
Yeah.
then you can go out and do something like spectacular. Like me, I'm going to pick up and move. I'm heading out of this world, out of this place of where I want to go. Do something epic, quit your job, take on a new assignment,
Or like I say,
change your
don't
life.
Big changes.
change yourself. Change
Yeah,
Hmm.
yourself. Don't
Right.
try to
Right.
change the world.
Right.
yeah.
Focus on you.
Yeah.
Focus on
No
you,
one else is going to do it.
and then you can help others. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what? The matrix that the modern thinkers think about today is all about division and separation, classes of people, groups of politics. So everything causes separation and division. But, and it's sad, but if you put yourself in a position of being able to help other people to forget all that and bring out what's important to them, help people find themselves,
Mhm.
ignite that spark in them for self adventure, for self worth, for self exploration. I don't know where I would be if it hadn't been for you folks here, because you've all shown me a different way, or a different way to think about
Different
things and
lenses to
navigate
look
this
through.
life. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just that's the main what Robert has taken the time to explain tonight gives you the tools for understanding
Mhm.
that we all have that ability within ourselves to change whatever parameters of this matrix we want. We are our own programmers.
Mhm.
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 So
Yep.
thank you,
Yep.
Robert, for
Well
Yes.
spending
said.
time with
Yep.
us
Well
and
said.
laying it out like that. I really enjoy it. And you're going to add this to your website at some point?
Yeah, I'm going to be putting the slides up. I may do a narration on it, because there's obviously a lot more that that the yap was flapping than was
Mhm.
on the
I
slide.
say do that narration. Yeah, that would add a lot
Yeah.
to it. Absolutely. Yep. Good idea.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to be putting that up, but I can't tell you how much I really appreciate everybody tonight.
Love and
It's
gratitude, Robert. Love and
Yeah,
gratitude. Thank you
I
for sharing.
really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, it's
Absolutely.
been a while since you've been able to lay it out. I know it's been at least 6 months, if not more, since you were on Rockies the
oh
last time.
it's been over a year, I think. No,
Yeah.
we did the first show on Informatica 4 years ago,
Wow.
Right.
and
Right.
it was nothing. It was just a
No,
surface.
you've fleshed it out
Sure.
now.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But when you put a bunch of stuff into something, and you go, I don't know how people going to react to this. You don't know until you put it out there. And
Yeah.
what better way to do it than with a bunch of intelligent, critical thinking, open-minded people that are just going to look at it and go, you get nobody's going to. There wasn't any judgment, right? There was,
Mhm.
at a minimum, there was like, what is this guy smoking? And then you could, and then maybe a little wheel turn here and there. But for me, just to get it out from myself,
Mhm.
it just, I was like,
Hmm.
oh God, now I've got like 3 or 4 parts to do here. This is gonna
Yeah.
keep going.
Well, this is a
That's
good
awesome.
environment for it, Robert,
Yeah.
really, because
Yep.
you were on different kind of show. This type of show has a different audience draw, and people can relate to it and understand it a little bit
Mhm.
more effectively. And I look forward to you adding it to your website and getting it up there running on your website, because everybody, we've included Robert's contact information in our YouTube page,
Mhm. We'd
and
love
you
to have
you
you
can
back
follow him
too.
on Facebook, or
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Lori.
absolutely. Yeah, I just would love to have him come back and share more. That's great. I'm just soaking it up like a sponge, so I like it. It's my
Yeah,
Well,
we'd
kind
love
of
to have you back, Robert.
information.
well, I appreciate that. And just, until next time, just make sure you're minding your monads in the matrix.
And with that, you all have a wonderful weekend. It's been a
Bye,
fantastic
everybody.
show. Thank you so much, everyone. Peace out and love.
Have a great weekend.